So again, welcome, and we are in a new series, and if you've missed last week, I would encourage you to go find that message online, because it'll help you understand where Nehemiah takes place in the storyline in the Bible, where it fits and how it fits in with the storyline of the Bible. As a quick refresh, Nehemiah found out that the resettlement project, these are Jews returning home after a 70-year-long exile, he found out that that resettlement project wasn't going too well. Their capital, Jerusalem, was still in a state of disrepair. The walls were in pieces. The prized jewel, that is Jerusalem, the prized jewel of their ancestors, was very much a defenseless city. And Nehemiah was praying and trying to figure out how he could help. He is a government employee back in Susa under the Persian Empire, and he's praying, how can I help? How can I contribute to the work of renovating the city and renewing the church in that city? And this brings us to chapter 2. After a good few months of praying and seeking the Lord's blessing, Nehemiah finally makes a move. He goes to his boss, the king of Persia, to ask for a leave of absence and a whole bunch of resources to rebuild Jerusalem's walls. As we'll see in a minute, this really was a big ask. It was a mission well worthy of William Carey, the famous missionary. His words and expression that expect great things from God and attempt great things for God. This is what Nehemiah now does. And so to keep things simple, there are only two things that I want us to see in the text today. Firstly, we'll see the good hand of God strengthens God's people for their mission and work. And secondly, we'll see that even when we experience the good hand of God, the good hand of God does not remove every opposition we might face. So the good hand of God energizes God's people for their work and mission. The good hand of God doesn't remove every obstacle that those people will face. Looking at the text, let's get a feel for the situation that Nehemiah found himself in. He had been, if you remember, crying for God's people, praying for God's people, fasting for God's people, confessing the sins of God's people, and eventually a plan begins to emerge. He wants to go back to Jerusalem himself, and he wants to help God's people. But first, there is the matter of his current employment. He has a job. So as we closed last week, we found out Nehemiah was the cupbearer of the king. His job was to keep the king alive. That's a huge responsibility, a really important job in the empire. His job is to make sure that the king stays alive, ensuring no one poisoned his wine. And so it was a huge responsibility, and he had given the king years of loyal service. And I'm sure the king valued and trusted Nehemiah's loyal service. So we might imagine it'd be difficult for the king of Persia to let Nehemiah go on this personal expedition of his. It'd be difficult for the king to let such a trustworthy and honest servant go. But Nehemiah, of course, had been prayerfully considering this very plan. Remember his prayer last week. He prayed to God, give success to your servant today, and grant him mercy in the sight of this Persian king. He's not fumbling himself into a situation here. He has prayed about it, and he is asking the Lord's blessing so that when I go to the king and ask for this leave of absence, Lord, that you would grant mercy for when I ask. Whatever passion and concern Nehemiah felt towards the exiles in Jerusalem, and he really was passionate about their plight, Nehemiah well knew that success in this matter is not going to be down to his passion or his personal convictions. If he was going to have success, if he was going to get his leave of absence, it would be entirely owing to the good hand of God upon his life. And so was it. Was the good hand of God upon Nehemiah and upon Nehemiah's plans? It was. Look at verse 2 with me. The king said to me, that's Nehemiah, "Why is your face sad, seeing you are not sick?" This is nothing but sadness of the heart. This verse alone might not seem like much to us, but remember, this is the king talking. This is the king talking, the one who rules the super empire of the day. He is the most powerful person of the ancient world. It wouldn't be a stretch to say that the emotional shifts and aches of his servants isn't that king's concern. It's not a priority for him. What matters to the king is that his servants do their job with professionalism and not bring their personal problems to work with them. That's what matters to a powerful king. But it seems providentially that Nehemiah's relationship with this king was more than a professional relationship. It was professional, but it was more than professional. Over time, the king had gotten to know Nehemiah. He could see when Nehemiah wasn't his usual self, when something was bothering him. And that's the beauty of verse 2, isn't it? It's one of these strange providences that we find in the Bible. We have a very powerful king, but one who still seems to retain some sense of kindness and humanity about him, at least towards Nehemiah. In some small way, this seems like the Lord answering Nehemiah's prayer for success and for mercy. He is receiving an answer. The king is going to be an agent of this success for Nehemiah. The king is going to be merciful toward Nehemiah because he cares about Nehemiah. That said, the king wants to know what troubles Nehemiah. So Nehemiah spills the beans. Verse 3 to 5. The city, the place of my father's graves, lies in ruins, and its gates have been destroyed by fire. If it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in your sight, send me to Judah, to the city of my father's graves, that I may rebuild it. And this is a massive request. The cupbearer asking the king for all these things. As I mentioned, Nehemiah was the king's cupbearer, a position of extraordinary trust, protecting the king's life. So asking for a leave of absence to conduct a personal errand was a really big ask. On top of this, it's also worth noting the Persian king personally signed an executive order putting a stop to the rebuild and renovation of Jerusalem. In the previous installment, in the book of Ezra, in chapter 4, if you're wanting to go check, this king made a decree that this city be not rebuilt until further notice. He is the one who signed the executive order. So Nehemiah was asking the king to change his mind and to reverse his own orders. And that is not to risk a little bit of public embarrassment. For Nehemiah to ask the king to change his mind publicly is to ask the king to wear a little bit of public embarrassment potentially. And Nehemiah's request just keeps getting bigger and bigger. On top of this, Nehemiah asked for wood from the royal forest to do the rebuilding work. He asked for official government letters to make sure that all the bureaucrats will fall in line. Nehemiah was on a roll. He's just asking and asking and asking. A little too much, some might say. I mean, what are the chances of the king, the Persian king, the superpower of the day? What are the chances of the king acquiescing to the requests of a mere servant? What are the odds? Well, it might have seemed like a pipe dream, a project doomed to failure. That is, unless God was in it. And that He is. God is in this plan. Verse 8. The king granted me what I asked. And remember, he asked for a lot. For the good hand of my God was upon me. Hold that phrase in mind for a minute, will you? Because we see it again down in verse 18, this good hand of God. We see it again in verse 18. Nehemiah had arrived in Jerusalem and then went on a secret nighttime reconnaissance mission around the city. He doesn't tell anyone. He gets on his horse and he does a circuit around the city. He wants to know how bad the damage really is. He's been told it's bad, but he wants to see it for himself. So he's off to inspect the state of Jerusalem. And things were really, really bad. The walls of the city were caved in. City gates were in pieces. One of the gates, he says, is so badly collapsed that Nehemiah couldn't even fit his horse through the thing. It was so badly caved in that not even an animal could fit through it any longer. Man, we think our potholes are bad. But what Nehemiah saw was complete devastation of the infrastructure, right? The city was in bits, on its knees, begging for life. But having done the reconnaissance and having secured the resources to rebuild from the Persian king, Nehemiah finally reveals to his inner circle what he is up to. This is why I'm here, fellas. Verse 17. He says to them, you see the trouble we are in. How Jerusalem lies in ruins with its gates burned. Come, let us build the wall of Jerusalem that we may no longer suffer derision. Nehemiah was asking those people in Jerusalem who were there to reboot life as God's people in the city of God's people. He was asking those very people to put their hand to the plow and to shoulder the burden of rebuilding. This is your city. You are responsible to help build it. And this too is a big ask. It is hard to motivate people for this kind of spiritual work. That is, unless God is in it. It's a big ask unless God is in it. And he was. Look at verse 18 with me. I told them of the hand of my God that had been upon me for good, and also of the words that the king had spoken to me. And they responded, let us rise up and build. So they strengthened their hands for the good work. See, at both times in the passage where we read of the good hand of God upon a situation, it is the very source of people's willingness to get involved and to be industrious. It is because the good hand of God that the people of God are willing to do the work that God has called them to do. And I mention this because there is no shortage of thought in Christendom that if God is in something, we can take our hands off the wheel. I mean, if God's going to do it, then He's going to do it, right? We can just let Him get on with it. He's in control, we tell ourselves, as a way of diminishing or removing our responsibility to be part of His mission. But this is false, and it resembles nothing of God's hand at work in Nehemiah's life. God's hand was on Nehemiah for good, and so Nehemiah packed his bags and went to Jerusalem. He rolled up his sleeves and he got stuck into the mission. The good hand of God was on the people of Jerusalem. So when Nehemiah said, "Come, let us build," they responded by rolling up their sleeves and getting stuck into the work. Let us rise and build. God's blessing and presence and support of a project, a church, a mission, does not diminish our role as participants. Rather, it is the very thing that motivates us to be part of the work, to be willing participants. Because God's in it, we're like, yeah, of course I want to be part of that. God's in it. I want to be in it. I want to be doing the stuff that God's going to get on with doing with us. And this remains applicable in the church today. The call is still very much to come, let us build. That is an applicable call to the Christian church still. Until the Lord returns, we build, bit by bit, from one generation to another. We are creating communities in which we tell one another of God's love and His goodness in sending His Son so that whoever believes in Him should not perish, but have eternal life. That is what we are building from one generation to another. Using the picture of the church as a building project, Peter said, as you come to Jesus, a living stone rejected by men, but in the sight of God, chosen and precious, you yourselves, like living stones, are being built up as a spiritual house to be a holy priesthood. If you're wondering where God might be inviting you to come, let us build, the New Testament answer is, come, let us build up the church. Let's support her work and her witness. Let us be her work and witness. So let this be an encouragement to you. It is meant as that. Let it be an encouragement to you. The good hand of God is upon His church. Therefore, we are freed to roll up our sleeves and get stuck in, to serve, to support, and grow, and be part of creating a community in which the glories of God we do tell. Now, the other thing we learn from the text is when the good hand of God is upon a project, He does not remove every opposition. And this sometimes trips us up. We come to think that if God is in a project, then the road forward will be smooth, quiet, a leisurely drive. At the same time, when some of us begin to experience some kind of opposition, say someone makes fun of you for being a Christian or speaks poorly of your commitment to the church, we start to wonder, is God still in this? Some of us do get a sense like that, don't we? We encounter opposition, we wonder, is this where God's at? Is God still in this thing? Or have I deviated from the path that God has for me? That is, we are prone to read opposition or resistance to our spiritual progress as a sign that God has moved on and that He is starting a new work somewhere else. But this bears very little resemblance to Nehemiah's experience, and it bears very little resemblance to the experience of Christian life. Like, this is not what Nehemiah experiences, and this is not what Christians experience in general. Jesus taught us as disciples, you will be hated by all for my name's sake, but the one who endures to the end will be saved. All I'm trying to remind you of is that resistance is baked into Christian experience. If you want Christianity, this comes pre-packaged. Opposition to our spiritual progress. And that opposition is no sign that God's blessing is absent or removed. Opposition is not a sign that God's blessing is absent or removed. In our text, we see opposition through people named Sanballat, Tobiah, and then later on, Geshem. These people, these men, don't want good things for the people of God. They are the opposition. They want to oppose God's people. And you see this in verses 10, and you see it again in verse 18. It displeased them greatly that someone had come to seek the welfare of the people of Israel. They jeered at us and despised us. True opposition for the good work that God has called His people to do. And so the question is, does opposition to spiritual progress, the renovation of the city and the renewal of the church in that city in ancient times, mean that they have strayed from the good hand of God? Is Nehemiah got this wrong? Does hindered progress mean that God is no longer with us and no longer on our side? And I know it's tempting to think this way. It is tempting to think, yeah, maybe God's blessing is somewhere else. Somewhere in our minds we suspect if God is in it, nothing can be against us. And if anything is against us, then we must be doing something wrong. We must have stepped outside the will of God for our lives. To this, let me suggest to you, when you encounter opposition as a Christian person living faithfully and doing what you have been faithfully called to do, opposition may well be the sign that you're doing the right thing not the wrong thing. Opposition may well be the sign that you're actually doing the right thing, not the wrong thing. It has been said, if you're flying over enemy territory and dropping bombs on enemy targets, that's when you expect anti-aircraft fire. It's when you expect someone to shoot back. But if you're dropping bombs in the middle of nowhere, when there is no reprisal, no resistance, no countermeasures being deployed, that's when you have to ask the question, am I even in the right place? Am I even doing the right thing? It's when things are quiet and resistanceless and no opposition for days and days that you have to start wondering, am I still over the right target or not? And this was Nehemiah's experience. He is right on target. He is dropping bombs exactly where God intended him to drop bombs. He is on target. He is in Jerusalem, where God has sent him on a mission to rebuild the place and to renew the people. And because of this, he must know for sure that this is the right place to be, doing the will of God, even though opposition has come his way. If you look back at the text, his opponents were strangely official, weren't they? Paper pushers and so on. But in sources from both from within the Bible and then ancient sources outside of the Bible, but from the same time period, we discover a few things. We discover that Sanballat was a governor in the region roughly to the north of Jerusalem. His name is found inscribed on various artifacts that the archaeologists have found. And then you have Tobiah. Now Tobiah, or the family which he likely represented, had influence over the east, an area east of Jerusalem. So to the north and to the east, you've got opposition. And lastly, Geshem enters the fray as an Arab tribal leader to the south of Jerusalem. So to the west is the ocean, to the north, Sanballat, to the east, Tobiah, to the south, Geshem. No one with influence wanted to see the people of God prosper. No one seems to be an ally. So all around Nehemiah, there were these political pressures and oppositional actors taking a very dim view of Nehemiah's mission. They're not there to pat him on the back and say, "Go you, you're doing a great thing. Can't wait to see you succeed." No one wants him there. They do not want Jerusalem rebuilt. They don't want Nehemiah's people to prosper. And this opposition was no sign that the good hand of God was no longer upon Nehemiah or the people of God. So here we are. We've looked at two big lessons in the text today. Hopefully you've learned that when the good hand of God is upon us, He is strengthening us for the work and mission that He has called us to. And secondly, when we experience the good hand of God does not always remove every opposition that we will face in doing the work that God has called us to. These are good pointers for us as a church. We are, in various ways that we are able, to pull up our sleeves and to commit ourselves to the work. And the work that the Lord calls us to is good work. He really has called us to something good and glorious. We, like every generation, are called to build Christian communities in which the good news of Jesus, crucified for our sins and raised for our future with God, is treasured, celebrated, and circulated. We love it, and we want other people to love it also. It is active work for which God gives all his people various gifts to participate. Indeed, as Nehemiah said, "Come, let us build." And the Apostle Paul also said, "Strive to excel in building up the church." They are one and the same call. Come, let us build. Come, let us strive and excel in building up the church. May we also then respond under the good hand of God. Let us rise. Let us build. Let's pray.